Welcome to your NEWSMAX Daily for Wednesday, August 7th, 2024. It's the 220th day of the year, the 32nd Wednesday, and Purple Heart Day in the USA. A solemn day honoring men and women that have been wounded or killed in military action. The Purple Heart is actually the first and oldest military medal. It was established by George Washington, then the leader of the Continental Army, 1782. And it still has George Washington's profile on it if you have ever seen one up close. August 7th is also National Lighthouse Day. On August 7th, 1789, the first Congress approved an act for the establishment and support of lighthouses, beacons, buoys, and public piers. 200 years later, Congress designated this day as National Lighthouse Day. Lord knows what America will be saying about Congress 200 years from now, right? A lot of that is going to depend on the upcoming election. Not only who gets the White House, but who gets control of Congress. Late last night, we got word that progressive Congresswoman, a.k.a. squad member and Black Lives Matter activist Cori Bush of Missouri, lost her heated and very expensive primary to St. Louis attorney Wesley Bell, who is said to be more moderate and who was backed by a pro-Israel group. Yet the top of the ticket features Vice President Harris, who boycotted the Prime Minister of Israel's address to Congress a few weeks ago, and now ultra-liberal Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. And their ensuing campaign event in Philadelphia, obviously dominating the headlines yesterday. Let's start it off with Carl Higbie on Frontline.
Her first decision as the presidential nominee for the Democrat Party, that no one voted for, by the way. This was the guy she chose to be by her side. The day after the single largest trading loss on the stock market for a day, this is the guy she chooses?
Don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. Just do the damn work.
Socialism. You have got to be kidding me. Kamala Harris, due to the seemingly anti-Semitic Democrat base, she passed over what I think was a more viable national candidate in Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, in her first major decision. She chose this guy, the guy who was down on his knees at the George Floyd riots, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, supporting the drug addict criminal resisting arrest, writing "Justice Now" in his own special chalk in a face mask, while doing nothing for the actual law-abiding citizens that had their businesses burned down by these riots in his state. Tim Walz, the Minnesota governor, refused to activate the National Guard to quell these riots, and this guy wants to represent the entire country? No, thank you. This is Minneapolis before the riots, as you can see right there. And this is after the riots. Before the riots, after. I mean, like, there are dozens of these buildings, and this is all over the place. They haven't even been repaired years later. He bent the knee to the mob in his home state. Ironically, he's now running with the same lady that then bailed out those criminals that destroyed those same buildings in that community. You cannot make this stuff up. This far-left dynamic duo will do the exact same thing to America if they get a chance. They have no respect for American culture. They have no respect for our history and our traditions either. For God's sake, the guy made a video replacing the Minnesota state flag that has been a staple of their history for well over 100 years with one that more closely resembles their fastest growing population, as you can see there. The Somali flag. You know, where Ilham Omar came from, which happens to be the #1 terrorist recruiting district in America. Kamala Harris might as well have just picked Ilhan to be her running mate. I mean, Walz might be some lukewarm white guy from the Midwest as he perceives himself, but he's as far left as you get. Now, I know that the moderate PR machine is pitching him as like, he's a hunter and a gun owner and a military veteran, favored governor of a battleground state. First off, Minnesota is not a battleground state. They have not voted for a Republican presidential candidate since 1972. In fact, that was the single state that voted for their own Walter Mondale against Ronald Reagan while he won the other 49 states. So don't tell me Kamala Harris picked Walz because she wanted to win a battleground state.
That's Newsmax host Carl Higbie, and I'm going to go back to Carl in a moment. But he mentioned Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, who many people like Carl thought was going to be Harris's pick. Many people also think that he wasn't selected because he is Jewish. This is Newsmax political analyst Mark Halperin on National Report.
How will others read how things fell apart with Pennsylvania Governor Shapiro appearing on the ticket with Harris?
You know, he faced an unprecedented onslaught. I believe she was on track to pick him based on my reporting. But he faced an onslaught unlike I remember seeing, in part for how one-sided it was. He was the only person who was said to be under consideration who got all of this negative press coverage, all of this opposition research, his own home state senator coming out in opposition to him. And now they're going to have to explain it. He'll be a good soldier, I'm told. He'll support the ticket. He'll be at the event today. He'll try to help them win Pennsylvania. But many Democrats said she must do something to signify, maybe more than one thing, that she understands she needs to go to the center to win the general election. She passed over a guy who is a star in the party, one of the biggest stars in the party, for someone who up until a week ago could have walked down almost any street in America unrecognized. She passed over a guy who had the capacity to help her win the most important state on the map for a guy from a very liberal state that's no longer in play, all likely. So It's kind of mystifying. Obviously, people are going to talk about his religion. There's a great photo of Tim Walz with Benjamin Netanyahu. There's a big background. I don't know if the progressives who supported Walz in the last week know about how supportive he's been of Netanyahu and of Israel. But I think that no doubt the controversies, including the ones related to his faith, played a role in the recommendation she was given. I know that to be the fact. What she actually decided this on, I do not know.
That's Newsmax political analyst Mark Halperin. And I remind you again, Kamala's husband, Mr. Harris, the second gentleman, Doug, is Jewish. I know his name is not really Mr. Harris. All right, back to Navy veteran Carl Higbie, who spoke with Republican vice presidential nominee and Marine J.D. Vance.
So, Senator, as both of us joined the military because of a war, right out the gate, I want to get your thoughts on the man that you'll be running against. Essentially, he retired early because he found out his unit was deploying to Iraq. What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, look, I don't really know much about Tim Walz, if I'm being honest, Carl, and I think that most of all, what the pick shows is that Kamala Harris is really doubling down on the Hamas caucus of the Democrat Party. I mean, this is a guy who wants to ban fracking. This is a guy who encouraged the people who were burning down and rioting in Minneapolis. This is a guy who wants to open the American southern border, who tried to give driver's licenses to illegal aliens in his home state of Minnesota. So I think what's most important is what it says about Kamala Harris, which is that she's deeply committed to the open borders, high inflation policies of the Biden administration, and we can't give her a promotion, right? And that's what this race is ultimately about, is Donald Trump delivered peace, he delivered prosperity, Kamala Harris delivered unaffordable groceries and an open border. It's a pretty easy choice, and Tim Walz, unfortunately, shows that she's really leaning into the hard left of her own views.
But, sir, they are trying, he's actually trying to paint himself as some moderate guy to offset Kamala's California record. Is that going to work?
I don't think it's going to work at all. I mean, look, people are going to look at his record just as they're going to look at Kamala Harris's record. And, in fact, he maybe is even more of a liberal than she is, if that's even humanly possible. You know, this is a guy who says that he stands for working people. Well, I know what working people need is they need good jobs, and that's not going to happen if you destroy the American energy sector and ship all of our manufacturing jobs off to China, but that's exactly what Tim Walz has tried to do. I know that working people really suffer when illegal aliens bring fentanyl into their communities and drive down the working class wages, but Tim Walz has been all in on the open borders agenda of the Democrat Party. So this is a guy who they're going to say he looks like a moderate, he talks like a moderate. I don't think that's true at all, but even if it were, this is a guy who is governed like a very far-left radical, and it says a lot about Kamala Harris that she didn't go with, one of the more moderate options. There was the guy in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, who was liked by a lot of the moderates in the Democratic Party. No, she went for the most alien-hating choice because this is who she is and this is how she wants to govern.
Oh, and Senator, on that point, you and obviously former President Trump are running on a record of economic prosperity. You're running on progress. You're running on things that people could tangibly touch and put in their bank account. And it seems like your opponents are running against their own record, trying to moderate and say nothing about it. How are you going to shape the campaign trail to make sure that they are held to the account that they destroyed people's bank accounts?
Yeah, that's a very important question. And so you're right. I mean, Donald Trump governed successfully for 4 years. He delivered rising wages. He delivered peace all over the world. He delivered an American leadership that was well respected and could keep peace all over the world. And he delivered the strongest border policies that we've had in 40 years. Mm-hmm. And then you have Kamala Harris, who has been working with such an unpopular president that she almost has to pretend that she didn't exist in government for the last 3 years. I mean, Kamala Harris can't say, I delivered rising wages, because she didn't. She delivered falling wages, less take-home pay, less affordable groceries. She can't say, I secured the southern border. She was the border czar at the time of the worst border crisis in history. It is an astonishing thing that President Trump is not just running on, here's what I want to do. He can, in fact, run on, here's what I already accomplished, and Kamala Harris can do the exact opposite.
Well, she didn't even show up at the job, the one job that she had as vice president. But, Senator, I know you haven't dug too much into this guy because you're standing on policy, but he is also, Tim Walz is the guy who started this he's a weird guy insult against you, but he's the guy who mandated tampons for 10-year-old boys in bathrooms in schools.
Yeah, that's pretty weird, isn't it, Carl, when you tell parents that you're going to take their children away if they don't want their 9-year-olds to get a sex change? I think it's a hell of a lot weirder than anything that I've ever said or done. And again, it drives home how the Democrats, their entire campaign is built on focus groups and political consultants. Like a social media intern has decided that attack is somehow going to stick. What I've decided is that the American people are smart enough to deal with somebody who levels with them. And the truth is that Kamala Harris's policies have been bad for working people. They've been bad for businesses. They've been bad for our foreign policy. They've been bad for national defense. She just doesn't have a record to run on. And in some ways, if you look at Kamala Harris's record such as it is, she delivered a lot of soft on crime, open border policies when she was in California. She is fundamentally a San Francisco liberal who wants to turn the entire country into San Francisco. And I guess now she has a running mate who wants to turn the entire country into Minneapolis during the summer riots of 2020.
Vice presidential nominee Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio on Frontline with Carl Higbie. That's at 5 o'clock Eastern on Newsmax. Former governor and former presidential candidate Mike Huckabee joined the conversation on the Chris Salcedo Show.
It's clear the Harris campaign had their backs against the wall on this. Shapiro may have been the lesser of two evils in their mind, but as many Jewish Democrats have told me over the years, the new home of anti-Semitism in America is the Democrat Party, so they bench Shapiro, Governor. What do you make of the pick and the man they passed over?
John Shapiro is a very articulate guy. He seems to have handled several crises in Pennsylvania quite well, but he's Jewish, and he actually served in the IDF at one point in his life. Something I think he ought to be proud of, but apparently these days in the Democrat Party, that makes you persona non grata. You can't be able to be that sympathetic toward Jews and toward Israel. And it's tragic because it used to be that really, I think Jews felt most at home at the Democrat Party. Not anymore. There is a level of organized and unapologetic anti-Semitism within the Democrat Party. Look at Rashida Tlaib and the rest of the members of the so-called squad. These are crazy people, and they're anti-Semitic, they're anti-Jew, they're anti-Israel, they're disgusting. So whatever reason, I think that probably played into Kamala Harris saying, yeah, it's too risky because I don't want to lose those Muslim votes in Michigan or Minnesota.
Right, and there's a significant number. I've seen wild estimates anywhere from 15 to 25% of the Democrat voting base is made up of those who are not keen on Israel, not keen on Jews. Governor, MAGA War Room is calling out Governor Tim Walz, for signing a bill that required schools to provide tampons in the boys' bathrooms. This is the party that dares to call Senator J.D. Vance weird. Your thoughts?
Yeah, weird is being a Marine, going to Iraq, having a family, going to church every Sunday, working your way through college and law school. That's weird. But believing that little boys can pretend to be girls and you surgically alter them, or little girls can pretend to be boys and you mutilate their bodies when they're teenagers that can never be reversed. That's not weird. This is Orwellian. I mean, it just is out of control. Look, Tim Walz is compatible with Kamala Harris. They're both very left of center. But what I hope Republicans do is I hope they don't spend all their time talking about the label of left versus right. We just need to articulate the views these people have. Tim Walz is a guy who said that socialism is just another way of being neighborly. He's the guy who signed the most radical abortion law in all of America. You know, even people who believe there ought to be some basis for some abortions, I'm not one of them, but some people believe that, they don't even go with this idea that you can abort the baby up until the very moment of birth. You know, when people talk about reproductive health, the one thing that does is it eliminates reproduction. That's what that does. So there's no reproductive or health involved.
Governor Mike Huckabee, who I affectionately call the Huckster, on the Chris Salcedo Show. That's 4 o'clock Eastern on Newsmax. This morning, Newsmax reporter Sarah Williamson hit the streets of New York City to see what people had to say about Kamala Harris and her new running mate.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has finally been named as Kamala Harris's pick for VP. Let's find out how much people actually know about him.
Oh, boy. Another winner. No bueno, no good.
Great. Tim Walz has strong union ties.
Not a big fan.
Not a fan? Why aren't you a fan?
He's a socialist. And the country will burn down just like it did during the George Floyd riots. So,
where I live in northern Minnesota, he's not real popular.
Do you think that he's a true representation of the people out there in the Midwest? Do you think he has their best interests at heart?
Absolutely not.
Putting tampons in men's bathrooms?
Ridiculous. Totally ridiculous.
He also supports gender-affirming care for children and wants that implemented in their hospitals?
That's a crime. Sorry. That's a crime. Sorry.
Is he a fan of open borders?
You know, we need closed borders. We need to secure our borders. We need to, send them back.
Reporting from Times Square in New York City, I'm Sarah Williamson.
Thank you, Sarah. Donald Trump almost immediately posted a thank you on Truth social media yesterday in response to the pick of the Minnesota governor. Trump 2024 National Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was also on Wake Up America this morning.
Caroline, good morning. Good to see you. What's the reaction from the Trump team to this pick by Kamala Harris?
Well, as President Trump simply stated on his Truth Social yesterday, thank you. Thank you, Kamala Harris, for proving how dangerously liberal you are in choosing one of the most far-left governors in this country. And by not choosing Governor Josh Shapiro, Kamala Harris also proved President Trump's point that the Democrat Party has truly become a party of anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish radicals. And that's what this decision told us. And we very much look forward to exposing how radical the Harris-Walz ticket is to every voter in this country. The opposition research book on Tim Walz is deep, and we will make sure every American understands it.
Yeah, you don't have to dig that deep to find just some of his absolutely crazy policies, driver's licenses for illegals, sex changes for minors. And if the parents in Minnesota don't like it or agree with what their minor child wants to do, the state can come under Tim Walz's law and take your kid away. Not to mention, and this one just stuns me because it's not only is it crazy, but it's also for fourth graders. There are now tampons in public bathrooms in public schools starting in the fourth grade in the boys' room. Boys, Caroline, last time I checked, don't menstruate and have never menstruated, but they have access to tampons in Minnesota. How nuts is that?
That's right, Rob. And the fact that you even have to explain that on television is lunacy. I mean, what are we even talking about here? But these are policies that this guy has supported. And not only that, he's radical on the economy. The pace of inflation in Minnesota has outpaced wages. Working families are suffering because Tim Walz has supported Bidenomics, which Kamala Harris has helped usher the worst inflation crisis in a generation. Tim Walz supports free health care, free college tuition, and he welcoming illegal immigrants to the state of Minnesota. So he wants taxpayers to foot the bill for illegal people while they themselves are suffering. He's also signed one of the most radical environmental policies in the country, banning carbon-based fuels by the year 2040. That's only 14 years away. It's ludicrous. That's a gift to China. It will threaten America's national security, and it will certainly increase the cost of living in this great country. The two of them would be a disaster for our economy. And we'll make sure, again, every American understands that if you want more money in your pocketbook, if you want to make gasoline cheap again, there's only one option on the ballot, and it's the Trump-Vance ticket.
Well, you can't go for somebody like Kamala Harris, California radical, who her entire political career has wanted to end fracking, and somehow that's going to appeal to Rust Belt, battleground state voters. I don't get it.
Rob Finnerty with Trump National Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on this morning's edition of Wake Up America. I personally would like to see less Kamala. Well, I'm sure everyone would like to see less Kamala, but I personally would like to hear less about Kamala and more about where the heck is Joe and what is he doing. I mentioned this yesterday. Everybody's so wrapped up in all this. Nobody really seems to care that the president of the United States, the current president, who still has to be the president for 5 months, is completely MIA. It's the third day in a row now. Nothing. All right, let me go back to last Monday. All right, last Monday, the president went to Texas to pay respects to the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. You remember him walking in with the flowers, all dazed and confused. Then he spoke from the LBJ Library in Austin. He's mostly fine reading from the prompter, right? Tuesday, he reportedly had a phone call with the president of Brazil. That was it. Wednesday, met with Penny Pritzker, his special representative for Ukraine. That was it. Thursday, nothing. Late that night, he met with the hostages, or he was there when the hostages arrived from Russia, returning home. That's when he got on the wrong helicopter, walking around aimlessly. You remember that, right? Friday, made prepared remarks about the hostages and then was off to Delaware. We didn't see him at all from Delaware over the weekend. He came back to the White House on Monday afternoon. Nothing. Tuesday, nothing. Today, nothing. The president of the United States, the leader of the free world. We've seen him 3 times now, I think, in the last 8 or 9 days. And one of those times was bad. All right, Georgia and the Carolinas still dealing with the rain and flooding from Tropical Storm Debbie, which has claimed several lives now. Maybe the president will say something about that today, because he is going to have to sign declarations for state emergencies to get FEMA going if he didn't already do that. But our thoughts and prayers are with the folks in that area of the country. If that's you, try and stay off the roads. Try and be smart. You know, if you don't typically go up on the roof of your home to clean up debris, don't do it now, okay? On Wall Street, a big start to the trading day. Stocks bouncing back quite a bit, at least as of now. Keep up with all of the news all day long on Newsmax, Newsmax.com, and Newsmax Plus for the most complete lineup of all of your favorite shows and guests, like Greg Kelly Reports, Greta Van Susteren, Rob Schmidt tonight, Frontline with Carl Higbie, Newsline with Bianca De La Garza, Wake Up America, and much more. Fantastic expert analysis from people like political analyst Mark Halperin, Governor Mike Huckabee, Carrie Lake, Judge Napolitano, and many others. This documentary, special programming, so much on Newsmax Plus. Simply go to NewsMaxPlus.com. I'm Tony Marino at radio_Marino on the X. Thank you so much, as always, for checking out the NEWSMAX Daily. Hope you are checking it out daily or at least a few times a week. Please subscribe from whatever podcast platform you may be listening to. And don't forget, you can listen on the Newsmax website, newsmax.com/listen, along with the Greg Kelly podcast, Jerry Callahan, and the Rob Carson radio show. Newsmax.com/listen. Enjoy the rest of your day. Good luck if you're traveling anywhere. Be careful if you're in a in the area of the country impacted by the severe weather, and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
It's our America. We conquered it. We built it. Great values like honesty and fairness. Great courage. A great nation needs a free press. Newsmax is it. 30 million Americans regularly go to Newsmax when they really need to know. They watch Newsmax TV at home. On the free Newsmax app, they go to Newsmax.com. Start today. Newsmax is real news for real people.